multiple axis plots.
Okay. Okay, hi everyone. We are continuing our design review of visualization for version 13 of Orphan Language. And I know from experience this morning that this is our 501st live stream design review. Okay. By the way, had we finished on everything to do with vector displacement plot?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Let me just bring up the Christopher, did you ever see these list vector displacement plot?
Yeah, I saw it. Yes.
And do you have any comments on them since you have I know a use case?
There's no list version yet. So.
Yeah, no, I don't have any comments about them. No.
Okay.
Do you have a use for them, Christopher? Or
yeah, well, I have a pretty complicated use, or like a use that involves a bunch of geopositions being basically the displacement of a bunch of geopositions. Actually, they're astropositions, and then trying to display that. But yeah.
And there isn't a geo version of this, right?
No, and we actually hadn't actually even planned one, but maybe there is a use case for it.
I think
continental drift.
I think it's obscure.
So, Stephen, I just sent you a notebook with some multi-axis starting points. So.
Okay. Do we have people from design here?
We have Jeremy.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. Okay. The question is, what are those things called in military? In other words, when people have all those stripes and things, what on earth are those called?
Regalia, maybe?
Are they bars?
Yeah, bars sounds right. Okay. In any case, this seems like, okay, so the main issue, and is there, when are we getting enough activity, enough interactivity of these plots that you can click one of these and have something light up?
I expect to have that for this functionality in 13.
So in other words, what you're saying is the axis will light up when you click up a curve.
Yes, it will turn black or slightly bolden or something.
Okay,
it'll probably go both ways. So that you would perhaps click on the axis and the three curves associated with it in this case would get thicker as well.
Okay, so anyway, the thing that's happening here is, okay, what happens if the y-axis is also a multi-axis play?
You mean the x?
X-axis, sorry, is also a multi-axis
play.
We're
not handling that case yet, but that gives a good reason for wanting something that lives sort of parallel to the axis instead of at an end that runs along it or in the middle or something.
Okay, but what's the syntax for X multi-axis?
It gets a more annotated.
In what way?
In that you basically would have to say, curve one, X, goes to this, curve one Y goes to that, sorts of things. Or, I mean, actually, probably we would do a grouping of here's what the X groupings are, and here's what the Y groupings are.
Well, but you haven't figured that out. So let's figure that out. So you're saying here, these are the left Y axis. But now, what if I give another?
Actually, this one doesn't give where the axis is placed. It just says which ones are in one axis. The first group says one axis, 1, 2, 3. Next axis is 4, 5. It doesn't say where the axes are.
By the way, this is cut off on the left.
Yeah, resize the graphic. I have a bug filed about it, so.
Okay, but what on earth does this, I mean, these things went in random places, but what does this mean and why did it pick?
So it has a left bias. So you have 3 axes, so it put 2 on the left and 1 on the right.
Sounds political. Never mind.
I mean, we could look at like language and flip it for people whose systems are.
No. I'm joking.
Yeah.
Never mind.
I am too.
Okay. But why did it put the first ones of these closest in? It's not what I would have expected.
So there is no language right now. I mean, so we could discuss defaults, but do we need to design a language for where to place axes? Do you think that's important in this first preliminary release?
I mean, I think this is the most important case, but I don't quite understand syntax here anyway.
This just says, the length of that list says how many axes you have.
No, I understand that. This is, how does this relate to the whole filling business?
This
Well,
is
you're also
same
labeling
integers.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, look, okay. So you're saying each one of these is an axis.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sandra on live stream is saying, I'm surprised it's a highly requested feature in my field. I've never seen such a plot. You know what? As you get closer to physics, I think these plots become less and less common.
I suspect that it's sort of a function of cost of publishing in the old printed days or something.
No, I think multi-axis plots have become more common. I think they have become common in, it's a weird thing, honestly. And it's in fields where it matters what the units are and things like this. And I don't know. I mean, people plot the most crazy things on the same axes.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're very useful to have. At the same time, I'm not sure I've ever really seen a use of a multi-axis plot where it didn't seem like an abuse of a plot of plotting 2 unrelated things on top of each other. But that's a different issue.
Yes. Well, we'll our goal is to have it.
Right. Okay. So let's just review what it is that this means. So is this the 4 or is this the 5 that went on the left?
The 4.
And where did the 5 go?
It's on the right.
With its bars hidden.
Yes, the bars
Regalia
rendering in the wrong spot.
Okay, fine.
So wait, so it goes the left edge, it goes left, right. Is that kind of what happened here?
Yes.
Okay, and what if I had like 7?
Odd.
Would it go left 4 times and then right? Or would it go back and forth or something?
So
I mean, this is a pretty niche case, but yeah.
Right. I mean, at the moment, it says, hey, I have K axes. I'm going to put half of them on the left, half of them on the right. And if there's an odd number, the extra one is going on the left side.
What happened?
But the ordering is going to be the first half are on the left. It's not going to alternate or something.
That's probably some error checking on my part. If you do range 5, it should be.
Oh my. What happened there? So it didn't bar itself. Or maybe that's because the version I have is different from the version you have.
Well, I mean, it has some flexibility and I think you didn't like this style.
No, I know. So let's talk about this for a second, because I mean, these bars are pretty hard to read, in my opinion. Jeremy, got any brilliant ideas here?
But the bars don't mean anything without a legend, though. Is it?
Yes, they do, because the
no. I mean, the identification.
Right, because
Jeremy.
they represent the green curve goes with this axis. That's the idea, right? It's like in this case, it's fairly clear that if you want to know green values, you look at the green axis. Values for the green curve, you look at the green axis.
Okay.
There are probably some colors though that people use for the curves, but where it's very hard to read the numbers.
Right. Well, so here's a question. We could take the hue and we could darken it, like for the axes. What do you think, Jeremy? What do you think of that? Is that crazy? Or we could have the numbers not be in the. We could have the axis be in that color.
That's completely possible. That's
but in this case
done.
here, you are this is multiple axes, right?
Right. Well, multiple curves on a single axis.
Right, which in this case, oh, I see. This case I didn't ask for. But now what would happen if I had something where I said in this scheme, 1, 2, 3, 4, for example.
Oh, it blows up again. I'm missing closing brace.
Wait a minute. So somehow, in some cases, I'm getting colored axes. In some cases, I'm very confused here. In some cases, I'm getting regalia.
So if you have any axis that has multiple colors associated with it, you get regalia on all of them.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. My head exploded here. Yeah, right. Okay. All right, let's look at these alternatives. Sandra is favoring dots, and I agree that dots are much more natural looking. I think these bars are just weird.
But my concern, or a concern I have with dots, is there are going to be cases where we're going to, I think, have to use a line.
Yeah,
particularly if your curves differ.
If they're black and
by
white,
dashing,
yeah,
or something.
Oh gosh. Okay. Let me understand this. So, with color, I mean, this seems rather elegant.
Yeah, that was, Alan, I think, your favorite thing that you were proposing on Friday.
Wait, the bottom one. I mean, if you're using list plot, you can't even tell if those are points in the plot or on the axis.
Not if they're sitting right on the axis.
I think they can sit right on the axis with list plot.
If you had no plot range padding and or you set a plot range even.
Yuck.
Right. But I think as Roger was probably saying, I mean, it's like we have a consistent way with the legends for representing points, lines, dashed lines, etc. And it might be kind of weird if we just have a totally different system for this.
Well, the question is, what this is doing, if we have legends, let's remember how legends do it. Well, let's see. If we say, well, what should I look
if you use that example at the top.
Okay.
Yeah, so make a copy of that, get rid of the plot layout, turn plot layout into plot legends goes to automatic.
Sorry, get rid of the plot layout.
Mm-hmm.
What are those ugly things?
Those are placeholders you can edit.
Yeah.
Because we don't have any other
names.
Yeah.
Right.
So now if you said something like, joined arrow, and I don't know, you set some of them would be joined and some of them would be false. The ones that you'd say false, they'd show up as dots, not as lines.
Right. I mean, so if I say joined, does join take? I didn't even know it did that. True,
yep.
False, true.
And it'll just repeat if you give it a shorter list.
Okay. Oh, that's nice.
And I think it's the same with dashed and stuff like that.
Okay, so how does that work? If we say, plot style.
Do plot theme
Arrow.
goes to dashing. Dashing, dashed. One of those two. Dashed lines there.
Those are very big.
Those are very big.
That seems wrong.
Well, this is the
I think
things
what
got
happened is that
magnified,
it
so the lines would
expanded.
show the dashing more, and
Right,
the
I know.
points.
So that's a mistake. I mean, I think that's 1/3, 30% longer than it needs to be. But maybe if they're different dashing patterns, that's what you have to do. Anyway, the points are too big, and that's just a bug.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there an analogy to this that could be done for axes? You know, we've got a vertical axis here. Normally, if it had an axis label, the axis label would say X and it would sit off here, right?
Normally it would be at the top, but yes. For an axis.
Okay. How do I get the thing to go on the side?
At the moment, that's only with frames.
I
As
see.
we're switching stuff over to axis object, then it'd be placed, but nothing to show there yet.
Okay. But so, okay, so you're putting that label there. All right, so the question is, where do we put the indicator of which axis is referring to which line? Well, ideas, guys. I mean, I think it's going to be better off at the foot than at the head. Whatever we do here.
My problem with I mean, I like the foot, but we tend to have, you know, that bottom axis. I mean, so we're using a frame in that case. Then you're going to have other tick labels down there already.
I see.
So it's going to get a bit crowded.
Well, how do people do this in the literature? Typically, badly.
You know, so they changed the axis style. They rely on the reader to be able to figure out which axis.
Yeah, I know. I've seen plots where it's just completely unclear which curve it goes with which axis.
Right.
I mean, really unclear. Like you have to
way too many of those plots. In fact,
guess. You have to guess based on values, which it's crazy, right? Or based on the actual caption saying, you know, this increases as this decreases.
Exactly.
By the way, we should give people the opportunity to do that piece of insanity. We should not encourage it, but it shouldn't be impossible.
Okay.
To not label the axes. It's really disgusting and should be avoided. But okay. All right, so let's take a look here. So what options do we have? We could run it along the axis.
I mean, okay, so the super simple solution is to not allow multiple curves per axis, in which case our job is much simpler.
What would we do in that case?
Well, then in that case,
it would be the one where each axis is styled.
Yeah.
In some way, but what does Jeremy think of this?
So far, I like the dots. The styling worries me. I guess color takes care of it, but when you get to black and white, that falls apart. Like
I was going to say dashing on that is going to be really ugly.
Well, let's look at what it will look like. I mean, in this case here, if I say plot theme arrow dashed lines, that's pretty wild.
That works.
Wow, it's kind of impressive, but weird.
Yes, a little weird. A little weird.
I have to say, it works better than I thought it would.
Yeah, me too. I thought they would.
Yes, I think this is an interesting, you know, honestly, for non-publication purposes, this actually is pretty nice. I mean, if I was just doing it as a practical sort of, see what's going on, I'd like this. Jeremy, what do you think about darkening the colors for the axes? Is that crazy?
Some minimal darkness value. Some of those you don't need to darken, and they'd get worse. Like the blue probably is worse darkened, but the yellow, yeah, and the green looks like it could.
And what about changing the color of the actual?
Probably the same, where you wanted the same color to match the darkened color.
No, I understand.
No, I mean, I liked Steven's idea of we go ahead and style that, the line in the axis, but not the text. We leave the tick labels as black.
I've got another crazy idea, guys. Okay. My idea is, what if, so right now the axis is a gray line. Okay. Maybe this is crazy, but what if this thing became the gray line as well as a colored line?
You mean like two lines next to each other?
Yeah, two lines right smushed next to each other. Okay, can we simulate that easily? I mean, what we would get with a tiny offset, by the thickness of the lines, maybe that will look ridiculous. Jeremy, what do you think?
I'm going to try it. No, I don't think that's a bad idea. Also, maybe the ticks are gray, but the line isn't. They don't know, the ticks don't necessarily need to be the color.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, maybe the right thing to do, what I'm thinking is the ticks and the numbers are gray. Yeah. And what happens is it has a cladding, so to speak, of the color next to it. And if it's a multi-curve thing, it can be clad in different colors as you go down the axis.
Well, the problem with the cladding is dashed would do that as well. Like you can do dashed between multiple colors and it'll look the same.
Wait a minute. But I'm saying if you put in cladding here, the cladding can be dashed or not.
Wait, are you talking about something? Okay, if you had multiple colors, one option is that you just have multiple lines all right next to each other, like on like a subway map kind of thing, right? Where they're just offset by the thickness of the line.
No, I'm not suggesting. I'm suggesting that it goes part way. That if there are two, half of the cladding, the top half of the cladding is orange, the bottom half of the cladding is green.
The cladding is still a line that's like immediately adjacent to the gray axis line.
Right. What I'm suggesting is the cladding is, you have the gray line, then you have the cladding, then you have the tick labels. Jeremy can mock it up and see what it looks like. All right, that's a possible idea. And that way we get, I mean, yeah. I mean, I suspect we also should offer some styles that work differently. For example, the style in which, who knows? I mean, Ethan recommends a thing called TixZ. What the heck is TixZ? I never heard of TixZ.
It is a LaTeX drawing package.
Okay.
I think.
Well, I don't know if there's anything to learn from it. I strongly suspect they have not addressed difficult problems like this. The general thing we find is that when it comes to difficult problems, the atmosphere gets thin very quickly. Yeah, the whole could you do plot theme arrow dashed lines on the multiple plot per axis? I'm sure it will do something. What the heck would this do if you did multiple plots per? Oh, I see. This will presumably put your regalia with appropriate dashing and so on up there.
Right. You can try it. You had something, if you just copy the multi-axis spec below, where you manually.
I'm sure. But I don't think it's going to be. I'm not a big fan of that, but okay, so we can say 1, 2, 3, 4, for example. Okay,
Yeah.
so there we've got regalia and multiple. I see. That we're just having regalia. We're not having clad axes. I'm really not going for this regalia thing. I don't think it works. Anybody disagree with me here?
I maybe disagree a bit. Like, I mean, I just think it's much, I mean, one, it's definitely a bit less hokey than the kind of colored axes. And also, I think it's just more in line with how legends work everywhere else.
Or do you think it should be at the top or the bottom?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how it would interact, for example, with a plot label that's at the top usually, but
Not that I like plot labels at the top. I'm looking forward to plot label out of place. Is that coming?
Not for 13, I think. So if you scroll down while Jeremy's mocking stuff up, there's variations with the regalia and other, aligned differently.
Well, I think this is a better alignment than that one.
Mm-hmm.
That's frigging weird, in my opinion.
Okay.
You don't have anything.
What's the
Okay,
next
here's
one?
a question. What about
go to the next one, because I think it's close to your cladding idea.
Well, I think that's better. It's like labeling this, X, Y, Z. I think that's better.
yeah, I like that one too.
And this one, we're being pointed out that that's just not going to work because it's too confusing with points.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wait for Jeremy to get that mock up and let's go on to the next item. And I think is this the main thing we still have to decide with multi-axis?
Yeah, I view this as sort of a first, and we could call it, I don't know how we do experimental with a sub feature to a function, but
I thought we had a way of tagging that.
I think we did it with the vector geo stuff, where that was sort of a setting that was experimental.
I just want to talk about this thing here. So the issue is, in principle, boy, we've got axis positions and we've got curves. And in a sense, what we have to do is map, look, I mean, we could have a syntax where we say left arrow 1, 2. We could do this. We could say this means 2 left axes with those curves in them.
And probably in that order, going left to right.
Exactly.
So outside in for the
That's
left.
correct. Well, yeah, but for right, it should go from left to right as well. That would be super confusing. What's that?
Reading order.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it will be totally confusing if it went the other way.
Yeah.
And then that extends to bottom and top eventually.
Yes, I think so. But I would say that I'm not keen on having this plot layout multi-axis. I would be much I would have thought this should be something like well, is it axes positions or is it frame positions? Does this work with axes or only with frames?
And it's really a frame thing.
Okay.
I mean, I have seen people do, where they don't draw like the top frame edge in a case like this. So it really
what
is
would be
more
what would be the right?
axis-like.
Or frame axes? What do we have? What do we want to call this? I think this should be its own option. I don't think this should be hidden inside a plot layout.
I'm fine with that. I want to make that also experimental. So because the only thing I want to get in before we nail it finally is a more deployment, so we see more problems.
Yeah, I agree. But okay, so what should we call this option? This is the option that basically says where to put. Okay, what are some similar options? There's scaling. What is that called? What is that called? Plot. I'm losing my mind.
Scaling functions or
Oh,
something?
scaling function. Yeah. Right. Scaling functions. Okay, that's a different thing. But this is, I mean, scaling functions could be different for different curves, could they not? What happens with these axes when one is logarithmic and one is not? Or is that considered insane?
I mean, I don't think it's insane, but it's not in the current scope. I mean,
Okay.
at the moment, scaling functions is, a plot-wide option.
Okay, so if I said scaling functions here, scaling functions arrow, well, log's probably going to go crazy, but that's okay. Let's do reciprocal.
I was going to say that's probably even crazier, but I don't think it did. Did it do anything? No, I guess it did. Okay.
The axis on the right, or
Yeah.
maybe do log, because then we can actually see if it.
I mean,
did
the scaling functions aren't going to be reflected in the axis yet.
Oh, that's just as a bug matter. Well, they are.
Yes.
Look, they are.
Well, yes, but I mean,
Oh, no,
they're
no, I
not
see. I see.
being-
The descaling.
Right.
The reversal of the
Yeah.
scaling is not reflected. Yes, those are the absolute values of the scaling.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which
Okay,
actually
let's come-
maybe in the same vein though as interaction with other options. How does has it already been resolved how plot range works with this?
No.
Because presumably you need one X spec for every axis, right? Or like one Y spec for every axis, right?
Right. I mean, so the way that would work would be like how it does for parallel axis plot, where you list out rules. One goes to 0 to 10, 2 goes to whatever.
For plot range.
Mhm.
Okay, so
But now
plot
you'd
range.
also need to maybe parallel axis plot already does this as well, but also you presumably need some way of specifying how they line up with each other, right? Like if, for example, you wanted the zeros to align.
Good point. How does parallel axis plot do that?
The alignment is, the bottom, ends of the plot ranges are at the bottom, and the top ends of the plot ranges are at the top.
So you can use plot range to, it's a little bit manual, but you can use plot range to get everything where you want it, right?
Right.
Okay.
You're basically setting, what the axis range is for each axis.
Okay, is that documented in the plot range thing that for parallel axis plot? So that would presumably be the exact same story here.
Well, except that you have the X and the Y situation.
Which, the rule syntax.
I'm just
That-
sorry.
that
I'm just asking you
generalizes
the
okay.
question: does plot range document this case for parallel axis plot?
No.
Sploff. Why not?
Because it's very specific to parallel axis plot and radial axis plot.
But it should have a note that says that. Otherwise, people are going to get super confused. Okay, here's Jeremy's cladding. I don't think that looks that bad. I think this looks better than this.
Oh, this is the other way around from how you explained it, Stephen. But this looks better.
No, it isn't.
No, this is what Stephen was describing.
Okay, I thought that you wanted the axis and ticks to be the color. And
No,
the-
no, no, no,
There
no.
was that too, but he wanted a colored line parallel to the axis line.
I see.
And I would argue that actually this one might look slightly better with the cladding on the inside.
Well, then they would block the ticks, wouldn't
Yeah,
they?
you're overlapping ticks, it'll be a problem, especially short ticks.
But then this would go on the outside as well. I like this. I mean, maybe this case is an optimal case for it, but I like this. Now, what about double cladding, multi-cladding? Would one multi-clad with
You
multiple
could do multiple lines there, it would look just fine. Yeah,
And what about with dashing? Again, dashing, I don't think is going to look that bad. It might look
Yeah.
a little weird. For example, here's a case that would look weird. If it's all black and white and you have different shades of, different flavors of dashing next to each other.
that's where the bottom's probably better. You get enough to understand what's going on, but it's not distracting, at least when you get up towards the top of the plot.
Well, but I mean,
Right,
but then you'd have to stack them, right? If there are multiple things per axis, you'd have to stack the cladding elements.
Might not do too bad.
I think it's more I like this better than this. This is visually distracting to me.
Actually, though, I mean, both, I think, right. I mean, the case where you have different dashing styles and it's all black and white. I mean, I think if you had them next to each other, it would probably look very strange. But also,
Yeah.
if you had them one after the other, like in some sort of, the bottom half is this dashing style, the top half is another dashing style, that could also be really confusing.
Yeah,
'cause
that
it
would
won't
be
an
really
obvious
confusing.
break.
Right. They would have to be broken apart, which is possible. You could have things of
I mean,
that.
I think even with colors, you might want to do that in that case.
Yeah, you do want to break them apart. I don't think you want them right next to each other.
Well, so I mean, I guess the question is then, which is better? Is it this or the version that we saw above, where it was just like a little sample that was to the left of the numbers? I don't know how else
I
to
prefer
describe it.
this. I significantly prefer this. I think this looks a lot cleaner.
This one makes me feel like double vision's kicking in or something.
Yeah, that's my only concern. It's like when I'm looking at it on a smaller screen, right? And at first I thought the lines were blurry.
Well, look, we could give people, particularly
I mean,
since
we
it's an
can give
experimental
people
feature.
options. I mean,
Yes.
there's no problem with
Right,
that.
we got to name the options, though.
Mhm.
Clad
I mean, and
axis.
the other thing is like, the case where we have actual labels associated with the curves, because they're, association keys or plot labels or something. It's probably going to kick into, something slightly different, closer to, the other one where the stuff is to the left of the things, because it will be like the legend where you have a line swatch and the label perhaps.
But also one other detail is, what about points? Like, what about if it's not joined? Do you also just show a line?
Yeah, you show a line, I think. I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Is it possible to have two different x-axes? Someone asks. The answer is not yet, but it will be. I mean, that will get very, very weird. But I mean, look, we're dealing with corner cases here. I mean, the most common case is going to be, so wait a minute, let's look at the most common case. The most common case is some lines are associated with the left axis, some lines are associated with the right axis.
I mean, the most common case is you have two curves. And one's on the left and one's on the right.
Okay, and there we would do cladding for that by default. Is that the right idea?
Okay, sure.
I think that'll look pretty decent. Fine. And then we can have options for right now, method options of some kind or something. And we can call this, I don't know, cladded axes or something versus swatched axes or something like that versus swatches.
Yep,
But-
I have no problem coming up with names. So
Okay, but let's understand the name of this option here. So what is this option? This option says which curve is associated, or which data set is associated with which axis.
Maybe we
You
should
know-
call it multi-axis. Because then we can that can sort of expand to the.
Multi-axis arrow automatic.
Right, for instance. That would be one, but then your setting up there would be an example of a setting.
Sure. I see. In other words, you are defining the multi-axis.
Yeah. If you set multi-axis to anything.
Well, multi-axis false would be there aren't any multi-axes.
Right, none or false.
Or none, or yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the right spelling of multi-axes?
That's a question for you.
Yes.
I was using capital A for a long time, and then
well,
I mean, and so like, if you like that plot layout command that you have right below where you're typing, it is case insensitive with regard to the A.
Well, okay, so multi-axis I would buy. Multi-axis option.
I like what you did first. Camel case plural axes, because
I don't know, frame axis. Well, wait a minute, frame ticks.
I mean, we have things that go both ways, I think, in singular and plural.
So on the Google Ngrams viewer, it looks like multi-axis with a lowercase a is more popular for what it's worth.
Well, then we should be using it because words always smoosh.
Exactly.
English is becoming German and Swedish.
Yeah.
Right.
Ethan is commenting that one thing we can do is to color, I think it's pretty ugly, but color the label and not, that's another option, that's another case. If there is a frame label, you could color the frame label, or you could put a swatch by the frame label rather than coloring the axis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that makes sense to me to do a swatch. I think it looks pretty ugly to actually color the frame label itself.
It doesn't look that bad.
Well, that's another option, but certainly when there are frame labels, I mean, there are plenty of cases where there are anonymous curves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that all these cases are relevant. I mean, there's cladding with a frame label. There's the color of the frame label. There's a swatch with the frame label. Why don't you just describe all of those? And let's call this, I mean, I hate to call it multi-axis options, but I wonder whether there's a better, because that way, I mean, the more consistent thing would be multi-axis rules. Settings. And then the answer, well, what about rules? Because it's basically, they're not, here, what we could say in this is we could have something where we say, in principle, we could have a complicated thing where we say styling, arrow, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure I like this completely, but the left-right thing, no. That's wrong, because you definitely want the possibility of just saying curve 1, 2, whatever. Multi-axis behavior, multi-axis rendering.
What do we have that ends in styling?
Usually
just anatomy styling and
style.
geostyling. Those are not options. They're directives, basically.
Yes.
Is there an axis style or axes style or
there
something?
There is an axis style.
So why is it not in there?
I think that's a lot of stuff to put in there, potentially.
Well, maybe we call it multi-axis style. That's not, no, style is usually a style setting. Okay, what
I mean,
do we
if you
call
want to
it?
go
So-
deep, you could call it specification.
Blah.
If you want a whole sub-language for doing it.
Let's not use the word specification. We've not used that anywhere. What are some other things that we might use? Multi-axis. I mean, we have things that are called actions, multi-axis. What do we do in some of the user, the UI?
Appearance?
Those are usually very shallow. I mean, a list of strings type thing.
Right. Let's keep going and look at the rest of what we have to look at here.
Okay. And you want one option to rule them all, or do you want multi-axis and multi-axis, postfix to be determined?
Well, I mean, we could have multi-axis style be its own thing. There is a certain argument for that because you can set multi-axis style once and for all. That's the styling you want. And then you could say multi-axis. What is the right thing? And then the second one is just where do you put what? Oh, no,
I would just say
That won't work.
multi-axis. I mean, it could be position or positioning or, but
All right, and then it could be true and false in the simplest case. You know what? It's not going to work to have the separate styling because you're going to want to specify this one uses cladding, this one uses a whatever. There are all kinds of crazy things like that you might want.
How far do we have to support crazy?
Well, I think it's just so long as we can specify it, I don't think it's going to be hard to support it. What do you think about just a pure multi-axis? I don't like that. I don't like that. It's too, it needs an extra word.
Configuration.
That can't be true or false.
None can be none.
Well, okay, so multi-axis, we don't use the term configuration anywhere.
I sort of expect configuration to be a permanent setting for something.
Yeah. Arrangement, none of those are very good.
Positioning?
That suggests it's positioning of the axes, which it
Yeah.
isn't. It's the which curve goes with which.
Well, I mean, depends on which way you look at it. I mean, because you are sort of, specifying, you have your left, right, syntax up there. So you really are saying where the axis is going.
Multi-axis. Which one are you saying? Arrangement, multi-axis configuration, multi-axis?
I said positioning.
I don't like it. That's going to be above, below, those kinds of things.
Okay.
But we think that this is gonna this thing is gonna take both that grouping where you don't say where you just automation decides where, and grouping plus location. I mean plus where.
Yes, and styling.
Oh, and styling.
Well, okay, it's multi-axis.
But you think it needs to be something more than just multi-axis goes to?
I do. I
Okay.
think multi-axis, we're going to regret using that name there because I think we're going to need, ultimately, we're going to need something called multi-axis plot or some such other thing. And we're going to want to have used that word. where do I have this? Is it under visualization? Gosh, when are we going to have the visualize function? Okay, okay, we got one name here, which you guys should try and think of alternatives for. Let's just look at the rest of what you have here. Okay, visualization scale, support for generalized scales, infinite scales. What the heck does that mean?
Means you can
Plot f, x goes from minus infinity to infinity type stuff.
Let's see what on earth that does. So you're saying plot sine x, x goes from what? 0 to 10, and then what? Plot range?
no,
No,
just
minus
just
infinity to infinity.
What the heck is that going to do?
it's going to plot sine x from minus infinity to infinity.
When are we going to have it be able to be automatic and use Wolfram Alpha style point region of interest stuff?
Well,
We should get that capability. I think it exists in Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. What on earth is this doing?
it's plotting it from minus infinity to plus
I
infinity.
can see that, but how is it doing that? What kind of scale?
Basically a scaling function that is, around rescale of, minus infinity to minus 1 to 1.
But is it is it logarithmic? Is it reciprocal?
Go to
Something like that?
go to scaling functions new reference page.
I don't think it has the actual formula yet, but
Oh, I hope it does.
Scaling functions new.
should have a picture a little bit further down.
Okay, so it doesn't have them yet. I think the
Default
default,
infinite scale.
I think that's the one that I used for the models of infinity, right?
No, I think we're using rescale instead of your
Okay, fine.
yours.
Right. I think that the main issue when you want these sort of compactifications is to, what range do you kind of want to
Emphasize.
yeah.
Mhm.
And that stretch is not properly, it's not fully, I think we agreed to change that, the stretch. It needs to be an interval, basically, where you want to see it.
Okay, so wait a minute. So you're, wow. I mean, I hadn't thought of doing this. It's kind of interesting.
Do sine of x over x.
That's really quite cool.
Isn't it?
I've
And-
never seen this kind of thing before.
And
I've
it
never
can
seen
work.
this in the old style pen drawing, Yankee MD days. I don't think anybody did this there either. It's a new idea. It's an interesting idea. I mean, obviously we see here this function. I should be able to figure it out what it is based on the fact that those peaks are going down linearly.
Right.
So those peaks are equally spaced. And that means that, what does that mean? I mean, that is a good behavior in terms of scaling, it seems to me. I see, that's a reciprocal. So for example, if I did over x squared, x cubed.
Probably you want plot range all. Well, maybe not. I take that back.
Oh, look what I want to do, but that's not going to sine x cubed, right? That's what I should have been
Yeah,
doing.
yes.
Okay.
I guess you don't want that.
Well, no, that's fine. I mean, that's amusing. But now, well, wow. I mean, I've never seen this type of thing. That's cool. I mean, I'm not sure I have any particular comment other than that looks like it's working quite nicely. I mean, what would happen if I went, if I said on here, plot range, arrow, minus infinity to infinity. We can't do that yet.
Well, we can. I think we have to
I'm
specify
not
the
sure
scaling.
if all the options are fully
I think it's not- yeah.
expanded out for this sort of thing, but also it's, by default, it saw that you had infinities in your X ranges, and so it auto switched to, the
we
scaling
won't-
function for the X direction for that, but not for the Y.
Okay, fine. All right, I want to ask about categorical scales.
No, let's talk about that next time. We wanna not do that now.
What's the basic idea, though?
The basic idea is to remap it to a quantitative scale.
Okay, fine.
In which case we have 100 plots that all of a sudden can plot categorical data.
But so what you mean by that is?
Cat is 1, dog is 2, bird is 3 type stuff.
No, I understand that. I'm just thinking, what does that mean for? So you're saying that in a list plot, I can be, cat, dog, bird, cat, 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 dog, dog, or heads,
Yeah.
tails, whatever.
Yeah, or you can combine sort of cat, comma, 1.3, dog. You can have quantitative and categorical. They don't need to be both categorical, both quantitative.
No, I understand, but I'm asking if the y-axis is categorical, then what you'll see is, as a function of x, you'll see the thing bouncing around between cat and dog.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is very
that is
compelling, but we didn't. I wanted sort of. It needs a little bit more.
It doesn't feel complete yet.
It doesn't feel complete yet. We already brought it up for 12.3, but we decided to go with these other scales first, as we were overhauling the whole scaling and axis kind of frameworks to be able to do this. So infinite scales, but also date scales anywhere.
Okay, this was a comment from Jack. So make label specifications more consistent and simple.
So what was the comment?
Well, it's about label scales. Boy, that's somebody using the transpose. That's cool. Don't see that very often.
I use it all the time.
That little transposey thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how you get compact, nice code.
Huh. Okay. All right, but anyway, so the question here is, why didn't this work?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Looks like a bug to me.
Indeed.
Okay. All right. Just pick it up as a bug.
Yep. I screenshotted it. So.
Okay.
Right. So the other thing that is related to the scaling functions is we're supporting dates in more places.
Good. About time too.
So if you
I mean, if I do
from time series and throw it into list line plots.
If I say something like battles in the Civil War, or is this going to be a really disastrous idea? And then I say, my God. That's what happens, I guess. Okay, so now we say, what is that? What on earth is that? Okay, can somebody report that as a bug, please? That's a horrible bug.
Yes.
Okay. My gosh, what is that? That's some idiotic thing.
Looks like a bad scrape of some sort.
And that's very dead as well. Oh dear, we're crashing here. Okay, anybody know what the it should autocomplete. Oh, for God's sake, somebody completely broke this. Growl.
This is prototype, right? At least.
Yeah.
This is deeply broken.
Just grab a time series from somewhere.
I know, I'm trying to get a time series. Where do I get a time series from?
Ref time series.
Okay. That was really broken. However, it's encouraging that the caching infrastructure looks like it's got nice blue boxes and things. That's cool. Okay, there we go. And now let's say here, how do we get the time values of this? We get, how do we get out of
Do you want like date, the date value property, or
what is it?
date
And why didn't that
values?
autocomplete?
Maybe because I have the name wrong.
Well, here, this is horrible, but let's do this. Okay, so now what you tell me is if I say list plot of that, I get that, great. But that should work, right?
That is do scaling functions goes to date. So I don't think it's auto. I mean, we're not auto detecting
We should.
generally.
We should.
String
We should
date.
do that for geoposition date, like this.
Why?
Is this prototype build?
Yes.
Yeah, it's prototype build.
Are you sure it's just called date? Well, okay, so there's something wrong there.
So
But I
something's
think
wrong
you
there,
should be
but
auto-detecting.
So we'll look at whether we can auto detect that. But an example that should definitely work is if you just do list line plot of that time series.
Okay. Well, so you're saying we can get rid of date list plot.
Essentially.
That we're not a moment too soon. But now date list plot has all kinds of detailed settings for the dates. How will that work for list plot?
So the ultimate way is we introduce something called date scale. Or
Yeah.
one ultimate way is we introduce something that is sort of the scaling function setting that allows you to control, sort of detailed how that goes on.
Okay, but I don't even see, okay, here, delta T in the date spec can be any of those. Right, that's clearly
I see
useful.
what you, I think so that's like sort of a data range type thing.
I think so. But those are the things we need to get. I mean, like this, specifying quarters and things like that. Those are super useful things.
Right. We haven't really, I mean, fine, we'll go back to that, but that actually kind of fits in with the date scale idea for scaling functions. And the other thing, one of the killer things here is that this will work for list plot 3D and list contour plot.
Sure. And you'll be able to have a date axis for those. That's really nice.
Right.
It's really nice.
Think of combinatorially how many cases that we cannot
No,
have.
I know. This is wonderful. Right.
Same goes for these infinite axes, by the way.
Magnificent. That infinite axis thing is really cute. Okay, I think is this as far as we can get here? We've still got a few bits of cleanup to do on this. Right.
Okay.
Do you want to return?
I think we should. I mean, given that once you have these things ready, you're going to have these things
No,
ready?
no, that's going to be for 13.1.
Okay. All right, fine. Is date scale going to be ready?
Yes.
Okay, then we're going to have to return on that. We'll have to return. Maybe we can put it together with some other cleanup design reviews. We'll probably have some loose ends from some other things. Let's see if we can
Okay.
combine them.
Sounds good.
Okay, and I believe we have another live stream coming up right now with spatial statistics.
Okay.
And
Is it
Yep.
same place? Same place or?
well, I think it was a different place. I think we should go to the different place.
Okay. See you there.
People. So those on who are following us on our live stream, please, we'll be back with you in just a moment.